Yeah, I do think it's important. I mean, we see this like in gender situations too. Like, it becomes a real problem when every analogy and story that a preacher uses is a football analogy or a sports analogy. I mean, it just does cut off at least half, and in most churches, more than half of the congregation. And so I do think that there is a burden put on the preacher to be aware that of the music, of the TV shows, of some of those things that young people are making meaning with. However, there's a danger in that too, which I think ultimately, a quick read of a Rolling Stone or an hour of MTV, or just kind of working to make this work to fit, will just be inauthentic ultimately. So I think we all have a burden put on us, and even an ethical burden, to try to understand another person's perspective, and that the preacher should be very aware that there is more to cultural consumption as well as just cultural taste than simply his or her narrow view. But at the same time, what ultimately matters is that it matters. And it can be it can actually be really detrimental, to get up there and talk about something that you don't know anything about, just so you seem like you're relevant and open. And so I think that, and people ask me this because I use a lot of cultural texts in class, that it has to be meaningful to you. And maybe that is old music or whatever. And I think you can take the edge out of that seeming really foreign to people by simply being aware that there are other things out there. But in the end, what's going to be the most powerful kind of story and analogy or point or connection to something is something that matters to you, something that your own person connects with. So I think there is kind of a relationship there where we do have the burden on us as people who are caring for a whole congregation of people, as well as trying to turn those people out into the world, to do some work at knowing what's out there and understanding the variations within that. But you can't just go to a website and get the latest 5 trends and assume that you can preach a sermon and that it's going to be meaningful. I mean, it almost is. It's almost even more pathetic. I mean, back to my Live from Abbey Road story. I mean, this stuff is deeply significant to these people. And they open up and understand other forms of music and other genres of music radically different than their own because of this interrelationship between their own music and their own experience in that. And I think both at a theological level, why we open up to other theological perspectives is to help us understand our own and enter into dialogue, but also our cultural conceptions of, this is how I understand culture, but I open it up to others because I find it engaging and I find it interesting. I mean, the real problem with preaching often is we don't see it as a creative activity. So it never becomes kind of a way of life. I mean, these musicians and their music is a way of life. I think that our preaching and our living out our Christian faith has to be a way of life, which means doubting it, which means doubting you're any good at it, which means doubting whether this is worth giving your life to, because doubt forces us again to rethink it and to ask bigger and deeper questions than we could have even asked weeks earlier.